full-size pickup trucks just don't seem to have the reliability that they once did. Not a week goes by that you don't hear of some major recall or catastrophic engine failure or bad transmissions. It seems to be creeping into almost every single manufacturer. And while there was brands like Toyota that we knew were historically great for reliability, even they are questionable. Well, we're going to talk about that today, some of the key issues, and we're going to talk about all of the major full-size trucks on the market today. Things are happening fast, and every single week there seems to be a whole new gambit of issues. So let's break this down from the absolute worst, least reliable truck. We'll work our way to the best, some of the worst trucks we're seeing. Have you heard about that latest recall? General Motors, GM. Of course, with their L87 engine, they have that engine that seems to be extremely problematic. Now we're at recalls that are pushing up close towards 1 million units. That's right. Allegedly, there's conversation about the crankshaft. The crankshaft was sourced from a Mexican supplier, and now, unfortunately, the quality control is such that the tolerance were slightly out. Now, in a high-performance engine, you want to make sure that engines that create more power, spin faster, have tighter tolerances. But seems to be not as such as the case. Allegedly, General Motors has been struggling. Again, almost 1 million units are now at risk because of NHTSA identifying due to multiple complaints of customers with blown engines, locked up engines as it were. On top of it, we can't help but talk about not just that 6.2 L87, but that same engine as well as some of the 5.3 liter engines had lifter problems. Lifters, that's right, the top end of the engine. And a lot of the repairs really meant that only maybe one of the bank was replaced. If you had a lifter that was damaged on one side, in the warranty, they may only replace that lifter. They may only replace one bank. What about the rest of the engine? See, not every customer is loving the way that the treatment is coming in the replacement or the repair or the resolution of some of these trucks. On top of it, we can't help but identify that General Motors has had a major pile of issues with some of their transmissions. 8-speed, 10-speed automatic transmissions have been a source of another bunch of problems. And while General Motors seems to be the last king on the hill with the naturally aspirated V8 engine, it does beg the question, what else is there? If you like the conventional V8 and you like naturally aspiration, that seems to be the only place to go right now because almost every other brand has gone another direction. So while I personally was for a while really gravitating towards General Motors trucks because of those engines, now unfortunately it's those very engines that are creating a whole lot of havoc. Unfortunately, with that said, I'm going to make it. General Motors, any of them with the 6.2 liter L87 V8 engine are going to be a major problem. 5.3s as well as with the lifters, also problematic, and the automatic transmissions on almost every late model generation seem to be somehow tied to a recall. So while we love the trucks, they look wonderful and they're carrying the brand to the next generation. Unfortunately, some of the supply chain challenges are getting in the way out of tolerances, maybe some manufacturing defects, and just ultimately it's going to show up as probably the least reliable pickup truck on the market today. It's sad because it's such a wonderful brand. And I've had Chevys in our family for years. I grew up with, 70s, 80s generation Chevys. Even the 90s was still not bad. And then things started to change. Then they went to cylinder deactivation, direct injection, and then things really fell off the rails. The second most unreliable, and of course not even close to the most reliable full-size truck these days, unfortunately I'm going to say it, is the Toyota Tundra. That's right, the Tundra now has this redesigned 3.4-liter twin-turbo V6. The same engine is now a source of hundreds of thousands of recalls. Also the same engine shared with the likes of the LX600 in Lexus. There's been many cases, complaints, main bearings going, catastrophic engine failures, knocks, as well as engines shutting off, weird noises, and ultimately leaving a lot of customers stranded. There's a forum talking specifically about some of the major issues related to these new Tundras. It's a sad state. And while every manufacturer says they have growing pains, it's rare that Toyota has gone through these levels of growing pains, but it's happening, and it's happening in a big, nasty way. Now, Toyota and their new 3.4 seems to be just plagued with issues. Just when initially they said, well, it was the first year, and then it was the first 2 years, and then at one point they started to suggest that it's maybe related to poor fueling, maybe issues with detonation, creating holes, popping holes, and maybe some particulate, and they figured they had the issue beat. Only to find out, well, wait a minute, no, the issue still exists. And so unfortunately, they still have more issues. It's not just the 22s, and now it's not just the 23s like they originally said. It's now also the 24s, and I'm hearing even now 25. There's some customers that have those engines failing. That's right. It's the reciprocating mass, the crankshaft, if you will, connects all your connecting rods and your pistons on the end. Well, it's not so much the rod bearings or the main rod bearings that are the issue. It's the main bearings on the out edge. Now, a lot of times they're suggesting it's extra particulate that wasn't cleaned out during the machining process or the cleanup process. It seems to be plaguing these vehicles over and over and over again. Now, there's a lot of experts really breaking this down and trying to tear the engines apart and really try to understand what the issues are. But ultimately, Toyota's still trying to work through this issue. And until they do, there's no way I can advocate and say that this is a reliable engine, because it's unpredictable, because it seems as though they haven't been all that accurate on prediction of which years are bad years and which years are good years, because it's totally out and very few people really seem to know what's going on. I'm going to say it's extremely unpredictable. And as a result, the Toyota Tundra with this new 3.4 is strictly unreliable, in my own personal opinion. And so almost as bad secondary to the General Motors 6.2-liter LD7. That's right. The V35A engine by Toyota is just one of those catastrophic engines just waiting to happen. I've talked about it in many videos. I'll link that video at the end, of course. If you want to see more and you want to learn a little bit more about that Toyota Tundra engine, I'll share a bit more there for you as well. Let's move on to the next one. Full-size trucks. We can't even talk about the Nissan Titan. It would typically fall in this space. I would say this would be kind of the next in line. It's not the best, it's not the worst. But seeing as they pretty much discontinued that and that model went away, we're going to scrap the Nissan Titan. Is pretty much gone. And now all you can do is go with the smaller Frontier, which carries the 3.8-liter naturally aspirated V6. Great engine, great vehicle. Not perfect, but considering some of their competition, I would say it's one of the best trucks to go for right now. That said, the next one in line goes to Ram. Now, Ram often gets a heartbreak. Stellantis has had their share of problems, but let's face it. I mean, Stellantis, I personally drive a Ram. I see it. The older ones are better. I mean, if you're looking at some of the older 318s, the 360 cubic inch, as you go numerous decades ago, those were great engines. Then they transitioned into what they have now, 4.7s, the 5.7 and the Hemis and these Magnum engines, and they lost a lot of durability. If you idle them a long time, you start developing an engine tick because you wouldn't get lubrication to the top of the engine due to small oil passages combined with a lower flow of oil pressure coming from the oil pump means that a lot of times you would start to develop ticking noises from the Hemis, and even this 4.7s would start ticking and rattling. Timing chains could start making noises, but a lot of them can last a lot of miles if you idle them very minimally. If you did your oil services regularly and you didn't run the wheels off it, they actually had a pretty good lifespan. But the problem is they've changed that. Now all you could get is the 3.6-liter Pentastar V6, which isn't amazing. Some people swear by it and they'll die on that hill over it. But ultimately now it's a Hurricane twin-turbo inline 6, which is a very complex, newly developed engine, brand new for this year. And a lot of people love it. It's really putting down the performance. It's more economical, puts down way better performance numbers. It sounds like crap. It certainly doesn't have the sound. It doesn't have the oral appeal that you were getting from some of the older Hemi engines. But it does put down a great number of performance numbers. The figures are astounding. The downside is it's a very complicated engine, water pump systems, problems turbocharging wastegates. You've got a whole new series of issues on a Stellantis-based product. Now, time will tell. We haven't heard a whole ton of issues with these engines, these new Hurricane engines by Stellantis. Seems to be better than a lot of people give it credit for. A lot of people just like to rag on Stellantis products. And while I'm not here to advocate, because I do know that there's a lot of problem areas, it has yet to really prove itself. That said, we know the increased complexity with turbocharging, we're going to see and anticipate some problems. Electrical issues can be an issue and are typically. That hasn't changed. And electrical problems will plague a lot of these modern day Rams. That's just the way it is. And so that would put it ahead of the other two, the Toyotas as well as the GM, because generally, as far as I'm concerned, when you have major engine failures, major transmission failures, that's the biggest, ugliest part. When those are unreliable, the rest of the truck is pretty much throwaway. I'm going to put Ram in the next spot. Then, of course, what does that take us to? And I'm not even a Ford fan, but I'll be open to say that Ford is likely going to be the most reliable truck. Now, if we're talking about the F-150, it's a popular truck. It's one of the most popular and the most widely sold across the North American continent. Now, while General Motors and Chevy combined sold more this last year, that's ultimately two brands combining and barely edged out Ford. Ford in the F-150 has done great things in terms of selling their product, and they found that transition to go from their older naturally aspirated V8 engines to their new EcoBoost engines, their 2.7s, 3.5 liter twin turbo V6 engines, and they've done it almost seamlessly. That said, there have been some problems. Ford's been having transmission issues. We've heard of some of their latest transmission recalls. Lots of issues there. Okay, so that is definitely a knock against Ford and a big recall. Some of these cars or some of these trucks are known to lock up the rear wheels, the drive wheels, driving down the road, and randomly they lock up. Very dangerous, could potentially cause a major catastrophic accident or injury or what have you. Nobody wants to focus on that, but ultimately that has been a bit of a problem as of recent. Now the Fords, they have a series of engines. We've also heard the 2.7 and the 3 liter engines and their EcoBoost, they've been dropping the intake valves. What do you mean dropping valves? Well, that means the heads have fractured and come off in the combustion chamber. And then you have parts internally still banging around and ultimately results in catastrophic engine failure. And this has been a thing. This happened not just to the F-150s, but it's also happened to some of the other models. For example, the full-size Bronco carrying the same 2.7 and 3 liter engines had a recall for another part supplier issue, leading to these intake valves cracking, fracturing, and falling apart. So that has been a big issue for Ford, and unfortunately, get around that. Most of those seem to happen on lower mileage trucks. Either it happens right away or it generally doesn't happen at all. That said, the most reliable Ford truck seems to be equipped with the 3.5 liter V6 EcoBoost engine. While they're more complicated, bigger displacement, more power, cam phasers can be a problem, timing issues, fueling issues, direct injection, carbon fouling. There have been problems, but the 3.5 liter V6 seems to be the best truck that Ford's got to offer right now. Now as well, some people like that 5 liter V8, the Coyote engine, also a very durable engine, and that's probably the most popular for those enthusiasts, the true diehards, and those that really put the true faith in the naturally aspirated engine. So the 5 liter V8 brings reliability as much as you can expect from Ford, as well as that 3.5 liter V6 EcoBoost engine. Now, while none of these are perfect and we're watching reliability wave bye-bye like the dodo bird, many of them are truly devastating losses. When you have catastrophic engine failures because of main bearings, rod bearings, transmission issues, lifter problems, that's seriously worrying. And almost every one of these brands is seeing more and more problems. Reliability, cost of repairs. Think about what these look like outside of warranty. It's a scary time in the automotive space, especially when a lot of these vehicles, you have to remove the cab to gain access to a lot of these parts, or you have to remove the whole front end of the engine. Remember when the Tundra came out? They had wastegate issues. You had to remove half the front of the engine or half the front of the fascia and the grille to get access to it. So none of these vehicles are going to be fun to work on outside of warranty. And if you're asking me what's the ultimate in reliability for full-size trucks, the truth is none of them really are all that reliable. You've really got to need a truck these days for work, really need to have it full of pulling power. If you're just using it for cruising around from A to B, there are better, more reliable choices, to be honest. I love driving a truck. Many Americans and Canadians like driving trucks. And we should drive whatever we can afford, whatever our needs, our basic needs tell us we need. But it's unfortunate now. It seems like reliability's pretty much gone for almost every single brand, with Ford leading the pack and GM really at the back end. So please do drop a line. I'd like to hear more thoughts from each and every one of you. What do you think is the most reliable? That's my personal picks for 2025. It's not getting pretty, but there's my picks. Hope to see each and every one in the next one, everybody. See you then. Bye-bye.